Hi, everyone. I'm Sheena Miller. Welcome to this Northern Cycling webinar. On behalf of Smithers Bikes, we're just glad you're here. And Smithers Bikes is a little grassroots nonprofit group that has a vision for cycling the Bulkley Valley that is safe, practical, accessible, and enjoyable for everyone. I'm excited that we're able to bring you this event during GoByBike BC Week, which runs February 7th to 13th. Thank you so much to Terry Lynn Gifford, our incredible provincial cycling coordinator, and GoByBike BC Society for encouraging this webinar opportunity that we're having today. Also, thank you to Christine Bruce, our colorful host, for her cycling passion and assisting to make this happen. This mashup of cycling-inspired interviews is what Northern locals and cycling experts love to get on their bikes, love to be together, and love their connection to GoByBike BC Week. Also, this is an important opportunity to chat a little on cycling safety, gear, equipment, how to get started in winter cycling conditions. So basically a mashup of the basics and a little bit about our Northern communities. Lastly, the purpose of this webinar is to support participants to feel comfortable to get on their bikes, to encourage you to try at least one bike during the winter, and to register for GoByBike Week, which again runs February 7th to 13th. Our panel today includes MP Taylor Backrack, MLA Nathan Collin, Smithers Council member Mika Meyer, SMBA member Brad Martin, and CMBA President Trevor Sowers, McBike and Sport owner Peter Kraus. Now over to our expert cycling enthusiast panel and our beloved community volunteer and professional cycle podcaster host, Christine Bruce.
Oh, it's first. I think my tires are fatter than yours.
The roads are gritty and messy in winter. We all know that. But what do you recommend that would make that part easier?
Fenders. If your winter roads are greasy and messy, then I fully believe in fenders. I have one bike that fenders just stay on it all the time. Not all winter roads are greasy and messy though. I mean, I've had bike commutes where it was several weeks on end of just very hard frozen conditions, and it's not dirty. So that's quite subjective to time of year and where you live, etc.
Okay.
Here in Prince Rupert, they're wet roads year round. So yeah, I just have fenders on, they don't come off.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks.
Adding to that though, I know another guy in Rupert that commutes, I see him commuting every day and he doesn't have fenders. He just goes for the head to toe rain gear option. And I guess he just figures he's got to wear the rain gear head to toe anyway. So what's the point of fenders? So.
Okay, you know, each to his own, right?
Yeah, there's more than one way to handle it.
That's right, I agree. What do you think about fat bikes? Are they just an expensive fad, or do they actually enable cycling in winter?
Oh, they open up new doors for sure. It can't, some people treat them as a fad, but no, I found it a very practical bike in many circumstances. And for winter commuting, it'll do two things. Someone who's a little unsure of themselves in terms of their balance or skills with riding on slippery surfaces, a fat bike just makes that so much easier that they'll be much more comfortable. So for someone like that, it might be a no-brainer. What I find is when I get on my fat bike to commute, my route changes. And by that, I mean, if I jump on my touring bike to ride to work, I go down the road and I ride with the cars and the traffic, and I can ride quite quickly and flow with traffic and all that. If the conditions deteriorate and it's icy or something, one, I don't really want to go on the road with the traffic. So, and two, I want more traction. So I jump on my fat bike with studded tires and I leave the road. And now I ride hiking trails down along the river and stuff. And so it's a whole different biking experience. And you couldn't ride any other bike on those trails. They're actually so slippery much of the time that I'm a little nervous to walk on them, but I can easily ride my studded fat bike tires down those trails. So yeah, the fat bike just changes my whole way of thinking of how I'm going to get to work. Instead of getting there as fast as possible down the road, it's like, well, I'm going to leave 5 minutes earlier and I'm going to take this trail along the river, and it's a really enjoyable bike adventure.
I think that's one of the reasons that people cycle, because they have independence and it's more fun.
Yep.
suggest a couple of pieces of cycling gear that increase visibility?
Yeah, something that I've really noticed in town, and I even see with a lot of walkers, are these really bright reflective lights. They almost look like, I don't know if you've ever played laser tag, but it looks like these vests that are, that are completely lit up with light. I mean, obviously the reflective lights work as well, but these are quite bright, and the colors are really are quite bright and obvious as well. So definitely anything that is bright. And I think the flashing of lights can also help as well. Definitely on the back of the bike, on the front of the bike, probably on you would be quite distracting. But anything, especially in the mornings, I see. I mean, obviously it's getting lighter now, but anything that can reflect and show light quite easily and be quite obvious to specifically drivers, I would say.
Everyone who knows I ride in winter thinks I've got those fat tires, but I have studded tires. So in your opinion, what are the advantages to each option, each of those options?
Well, it starts with the trails you're riding, right? So if you have a nice firm trail that's not icy, it's almost you can ride on whatever you want, sort of thing, because the trails are perfect. The advantage that we find up here with the fat tires versus just the studded tires is the fat tires have more flotation, so you have more surface area for riding, and you can lower the air pressure on those down to about 4.5-5 psi, as opposed to your regular bike tire, which you can't. So by having more surface area when the trails aren't super hard and they're a little softer, that prevents the fat tire from actually digging in and either causing harm to the trail, to the bike trail, or making it so you ride. The skinny tires will dig in more and can do harm to the trail, but at the same time, you're not going to have much of a ride. You're not going to get anywhere because you're just not going to be able to pedal on that type of the snow. So you're not even going to get to go anywhere. Whereas the fat tire gives you better traction. It gives you better float, so you can actually have a bike ride when on a regular bike you can't. The studs, and I have a fat tire bike with studded tires that sometimes are required and aren't. The studded tires come in really handy as your trail gets icier, moves from that sort of packed snow into an icier condition. So whether you're going up a little slope and you're pedaling, you might spin out if you don't have studs. Whereas if you have studs, they might give you that extra bit of grip to get you up that slope. Same as on cornering. If you come into a corner a little hot, shall we say, you might get away with it because of your studs on your front tire and that lower tire pressure. Whereas on a regular bike, you're probably going to go off into the tulies. So that's a concern. And the other one is braking. Although on these trails, braking is always a tricky one, and it's just like winter driving. It's going to take you longer, and if you spike your brakes, you're going to slide out. So you want to be real careful there. But from a pure stud perspective, if you dig out on your brakes, those are going to grip quicker and sooner than your regular tire, which you might have to apply more brake, and all of a sudden your bike might slide out on you. Because of course you're using front and back brakes the whole time. You're not just relying on your back brake or your front brake.
Right. And a lot of these things apply even if you're just traveling into town on the regular roads.
Yeah.
Whenever I take a fat bike out, I feel like I'm on a steamroller. You can go over anything.
Yeah, and one of you're right. So in the summer when I ride mine just in and around town, I pump them up more to like 18 pounds because I don't need that. And the thing that happens is as you lower the tire pressure, you have more contact with the ground. You have a softer tire. It takes more effort to pedal that bike, but you can pedal that bike. You can still go on your bike ride. So right. it definitely helps there.
Peter, how often should you get your bike tuned up?
Bike tune up probably once a year, depending on how much you ride it. Tires swapped out, just again, depending on mileage. Just look for cracking in the side of the tires and look at the wear on the treads.
Okay. clothing and accessory tips that always make winter riding easier? What do you suggest?
Definitely, well, you want to be seen in the winter time. So lights on your bike are a really good idea. But as far as clothing goes, a jacket with a reflective material on it, a bright color is a good idea too. If you have an existing jacket and you don't want to buy a bike specific jacket, just buy a safety vest, or we even sell bike vests that you can wear over top of an existing jacket. You want to have some good wind protection on the jacket. You don't necessarily need something really warm, because once you get going, you just need to block the wind. You're going to create lots of heat. But one of the really important things is the things that get cold the quickest and cold fast is your hands and your feet, because you're not really using those muscles. You're not really using those muscles in those areas. And then the wind gives you cold hands and feet. So a pair of mitts or a pair of really warm downhill ski gloves is going to work. Winter boots is going to work. And then of course your face too, depending on the wind and stuff like that, to cover up your face with a mask if it's cold and windy.
Okay, I want to turn to the winter cycling mindset. How would you recommend preparing yourself mentally to ride in snowy conditions?
Know that you're not going to be able to do necessarily, especially if you're on a fat tire bike, but even on a regular bike on say our trails, is you're not going to be, railing berms and hitting big jumps and all that kind of stuff necessarily. And there's a couple things there. One is the bike. I mean, if you're really, really, really good, you can do that on a fat tire bike. And that's fine. But the trails that I've been snow dogging, I'm the lead, like I do a lot of the snow dogging, the trail packing with that snow dog machine. A lot of the trails just don't lend them to that sort of more downhilly type riding. So it's just a different mindset that it's going to be different that way. The other one is you have to realize, and this goes back to what I said before a little bit, is you might not, where you're used to maybe doing a 15-kilometer ride, you're going to get that same amount of exercise out of about, let's just say half of that, because of the friction, because of the extra pedaling, because of the gearing. There's just a bunch of things that you typically don't have to go the same amount of distance to get that same ride. A mindset of riding in cold weather, and preparing for that, and being aware, because if you get the back end of the trails and you're by yourself and something goes wrong and you're there and you're all hot and sweaty and you have to try to fix your bike, you can get cold really quick. So packing stuff in your pack, an extra shirt to be able to just quickly take off that wet stuff and put on something dry, maybe another set of gloves that you need for your fingers, a headlamp, always, especially in the winter when it gets dark early, that pump, a lot of what you typically carry, but those other kind of things. I carry a spare little jacket, so that I know if I'm in trouble and I have to walk out, I can discard all my wet gear, put on dry gear. I have a headlamp and I can walk out. Cell phone, sure, but sometimes they get cold and they don't work. Sometimes you might be out of cell range, so not a bad idea to have with the Trail Forks app on it, but don't rely on that. You need to be self-sufficient. And I don't think that means you need to be able to light a fire, like the food, shelter, and warmth part. I think it just means that you need to be smart, that if you get into trouble, you're not going to be uncomfortable, and you're going to be able to walk out if you have to and leave your bike there, or walk your bike out so that it makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Something that I have, some people have, some people don't. I think they're called pogies, but they're those things that go over all your handlebars and that. It's just similar to what kayakers use. I'm sure that's where we stole it from. And you can get them in neoprene or different material. But what those do, those do a couple things. They make it your hands much warmer, so you can go out in colder temperatures. But one of the things that is really nice is you can wear a lighter glove, so you actually feel your hand grips and your brakes and your gears way better than a big set of clumsy mitts or big gloves. So also from a safety perspective, because you're more in tune with your bike, you have a better grip on it, you're going to be that much better and have a much better ride than these big clumsy mitts or gloves where you can't change the gear, you can't really feel the brakes, you can't really, if you're coming down a hill or something, it just, you're not as in tune with your bike. So having those is a really big advantage. The other thing I've done before, depending on how cold it is, I will get a great big set of puffy mitts, and I'll get hand warmers, and I'll start those ahead of time. I'll put those in my hand warmers and I'll put them in my backpack. And that way I know if my hands were to get cold and I can't get them back through conventional means, rubbing them together, swinging my arms in the air or whatever, I can pull those out and I can put my hands in there, get my hands back and get them warmed up. And then I can maybe put them back into those gloves or carry another set of gloves that are a little bit thicker than the ones that allowed my hands to get cold and put those back in there. So just little tricks like that can, because I mean, let's face it, do you want to be 10 minutes into your ride and have cold hands and that's the reason you got to turn around? No, so just prepare for that. The other one that's a tricky one, and it's temperature dependent, it depends on the type of riding you're doing, how aggressive you are, is your footwear. I still wear up to about -12 my regular biking shoes. They have good grip, I can feel the pedals, I'm comfortable in them, they're not super heavy. Some people that get cold easy might be looking at a light hiking boot, something different, but don't just throw on your bike shoes and go out there. At the same time, trying to pedal any kind of a bike with big, heavy duty snow boots like felt packs or whatever, that's a recipe for disaster. You're going to probably catch something in the chain ring or the chain. You're not going to feel your pedals. It's clunky. It's not the best way to go about it in my mind. Something else is you want to wear, again, depending on your ride, gear that's going to protect you from the wind, whether it's the wind itself or whether it's the fact that you're just coming down a hill or something fairly fast. Especially if you're all sweaty, that can pull the heat and the moisture or the heat out of you really quick and cool you down, and then you can be in an uncomfortable position, especially if your bike breaks down. So having that windbreaker and wind and pants, if at least have them available and know if you need to put them on or not. Another one is under your regular helmet, because you always wear a helmet. What I have is a little beanie, like just one of those little skull caps. And I actually have two, because if one gets all sweaty, I can toss that off and put another beanie on. They take up way less room in your pack than a toque, but they still do the same job. Another one that my eyes water like crazy, right? So I bring goggles, because if I'm going downhill something fast in cold weather, my eyes water, I can't see anything, I can't enjoy my ride as much, and I might have a crash simply because I can't see. So I always just throw an old pair, I just wear clear goggles. You can get clear goggles, cheapos, you don't need anything expensive, and I just either keep those in my pack, and then I just pull them out when I know I'm going downhill, and I throw those on, and off I go.
I do that even when I'm going into town. If it's not
a
sunny day, I've still got the goggles on.
Yeah, for sure. The body gets cold, but what all these things do is extend those temperatures in which you can go out and ride in, right? So absolutely. I even with my what I'll do sometimes is just I'll wear my big heavy boots to the bike trail, but over in the passenger seat are my shoes, getting a little bit of warmth in them. But the caution there is don't get them so warm that the minute you step in the snow, it melts in your shoes and now you got a wet foot.
Oh, right.
and that's why I like our trails, because they're really wide. In narrow trails, a lot of times you'd have to put a foot down or you get pedal bonk. So you just want to be careful with that thought. But boy, it's sure nice to slip on a pair of warm runners and go out there. Just keep it between the ditches till they cool down a bit.
Yeah. Oh, it's like having clothes just out of the dryer, isn't it?
Exactly.
How would you recommend preparing yourself mentally to ride in winter conditions?
It's an adventure. Just think of it as an adventure. Don't think of it as the grind, part of your daily grind to go to work. It's your, depending on how long your commute is, your 15 minutes or half hour of like playtime. And often the more wintry and snowy it is, the more you feel like a kid out there just having fun. And
That's true.
And something to look forward to is commuting in winter makes you warmer.
Yes.
And not just for the 10-minute ride, like for hours after. Like it raises up my body temperature, and people around me are like, oh, it's so cold and damp today, and I'm like, I feel fine because I had that good vigorous workout in the morning and I stay warm for a long time. And when I don't ride and I've taken a ride to work or something like that, I feel colder all day. I haven't had that morning exercise that really gets the metabolism going.
It also gets my brain in gear. You know, I'm a lot more alert, a lot more interested and engaged in what's going on, and I have a positive mindset because I've been on a bike.
Exercise is huge. It can drive out depression, and yeah,
Yeah,
a lot of benefits.
These hydraulic brakes are the best.
They're pretty quick, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's night and day. The thing is, you're not necessarily always going to need that good of a brake.
Yep.
But confidence in braking is a nice thing to have on a
It's a
bike.
nice
That's
thing
for
to
sure.
have.
Car, bike, whatever you want.
how important is it to signal your turns?
Oh, extremely. That's something, yeah, I think, you know, and obviously it comes from modeling that behavior as well. And that's something that I've really taken that initiative and making sure that I show that, model that in front of my kids and for anybody really that's biking. It does make a difference. To see what the biker is going to do is really important. And just to be able to give space.
Yes, true. I think communication has probably always been the key for me.
Yeah, and I said, why not? It's like in a relationship, it's always good to communicate. You know, if you're on a bike, you might as well communicate. It's always better to communicate than to not communicate.
If you're the person that's going to commute a lot, or you're thinking about commuting a lot in the winter, and you have a good bike that you don't really want to get salty and grimy, look on the buy and sell, or usually in the spring when we have our bike swap, which will hopefully run again this year, you can probably pick up a mountain bike with 26-inch tires for $150, and then just put the studded tires on that and just leave them on there. And you don't have to worry about the drivetrain because you're not really using that many gears. If that's going to be a second bike and you have room to store a second bike, then you can save on maintenance because you don't need to tune up everything every year because you're not only relying on that bike in the winter months. Right?
Great.
Yeah. Under your helmet, another thing under your bike helmet is a skull cap or something like that to block the wind as well too.
There's a lot of debris and some slippery surfaces out there on a regular basis. How do you manage that?
So one option, probably the best and safest option, is to think about maybe getting some studded tires for your bike if you're going to commute or ride for exercise in the winter. Just going to give you peace of mind and keep you upright. If you don't want to do the studded tire option, run your tire pressure lower.
Right.
More contact on the road, and then the tire just kind of conforms with the road, with the ground better.
I claim the lane a lot in challenging winter conditions, and I think it makes the road safer for everyone. Will you explain what that means and how you do it?
Yeah, I try not to do it. It's kind of like a last resort. But yeah, if you're in a situation where the only safe way to go is to ride in a lane, then you need to pull out right in that lane, and make sure you're visible, especially with winter riding. It's darker, people's windows are steamed up. They might not have cleared their windows properly. So wear bright reflective clothing. Make sure you have front and back lights on your bicycle that are very bright. Use reflective parts. A lot of bicycle tires, the sidewalls on them are reflective with car headlights and that sort of thing. Make sure you're highly visible. And if you're confident you're visible and you've looked over your shoulder and there's no one right on your butt, then go ahead and get in the middle of that lane and make sure that you've got that lane, and then get into position to make your turn or whatever it is that you need to do, the reason you got in that lane. And then, but yeah, I do that as little as possible. And the worse the conditions are, the more likely I am to be riding my fat bike down some trail that there's no vehicles on at all. And yeah.
Well, I find in downtown Smithers that the roads get more and more narrow as the snow piles up. So I'm forced to claim the lane. Otherwise, there's not enough room for me and the car. And so I just communicate a lot. I spend an awful lot of time thanking people and showing them, doing hand signals and waving my thanks. And it just seems to me the best thing to do so that nobody is scared.
Yeah. Well, the other thing to keep in mind, and one of the greatest advantages of bike commuting, is that, you can still qualify as a pedestrian. So if you get into a situation where you feel it's not safe to ride, get off your bike and push it.
True. Very true.
You can stop at a crosswalk and push your bicycle across a crosswalk where you have the right of way as a pedestrian, just like every other pedestrian. And as long as you're pushing your bike, you are legally a pedestrian. So you can morph back and forth between pedestrians and cyclists as conditions or safety, et cetera, deem. And I do that a lot.
Yeah.
You know, I think just in my situation right now, I always just stop at the crosswalk crossing the highway, and I will walk across. Like, because you know, if we are biking in it and it is, you know, poor weather, I'm often with my children as well, and it's just not worth it for. I just find the risk a bit too high for us to just be able to bike through right now. And especially our crossings aren't, I find the one specifically on King is not the safest at times. So just really taking that time to get off the bike, look both ways, make sure the left turning lane, people know that we're walking across, and then the road that turns onto King off the highway going east towards like the Safeway, that people know that we're crossing there. But with my kids, we always get off, and then at that point we kind of turn back into a pedestrian, walk across, and then once we get onto the other side, kind of merge back on.
Mika, lots of people feel like they're going to fall off the bike in winter. What can they do to feel more confident?
Some things I think that can, you know, the obvious facts, things that people can do is slow down. I think there's this idea, and I think even when people get into vehicles or any type of mode of transport, they, you kind of drive, walk, bike, or probably not walk, but bike the way that maybe you would when there isn't snow. So I think one of the best points would be to just slow down and just be really aware of your surroundings, because you realize that, yeah, most people are probably out there are quite distracted.
Mm-hmm.
And I even notice that when I'm just walking.
One of the things that I've done a couple of times over the years is just lower my saddle slightly, because it gets me, it lowers my center of gravity and makes it easier for me to feel like I've got control in case I do, you know, spin out a bit.
Yeah. And just give yourself enough time.
Yeah.
I think it's going to take 10 minutes to get somewhere. Give yourself 20. Always good to be early.
I think so too. I think you'd enjoy the ride more too if you weren't in a hurry to get there.
I'm just having so much fun on the snow.
Taylor, we often see your bikes parked out in front of your office, suggesting that you use them as a commuter. So give us a couple of routes that work well for getting around Smithers.
Well, I'm in Ottawa right now, so I'll have to think back to last week when I was in Smithers, and good routes for getting around. Well, you know, in the winter especially, it's best to be on routes that are a little less traveled by vehicles, because there's often less space in the winter, depending on how the snow clearing is going and what the weather's doing. Sticking to quieter residential streets is going to keep you out of harm's way. But usually, I don't know, usually I use the most direct route possible because I'm in a rush and I need to get somewhere on time. So there you go.
Very good.
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention some of the awesome initiatives that are happening in town with the active transport plan. And this summer there should be painting along the King's Spine. So there's going to be bike only painting that's going to go down the King's Spine towards railway and down towards the railway, which is great. And then I also wanted to mention Cycle 16 and their major initiative that they've taken to construct that 12-kilometer paved multi-use trail linking Telkwa and Smithers. I think it's amazing, and I know they have a lot of momentum right now. And I know as a town, we're trying to kind of figure out one element of that, you know, where that trail is going to go once it kind of comes into town. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to come up with something soon, working together. But yeah, lots of great initiatives. And with the OCP, make sure official community plan for anything to do with biking or active transport, please get your input in.
Yeah, thank you. Very exciting what's happening here. Infrastructure that allows all road users to use the public space that we call roads is becoming increasingly prioritized in cities around the world. And in winter, proper infrastructure is especially critical. So what's being done at the federal level to ensure that everyone in Smithers has room in our public space?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Christine. So my colleague and friend Gord Johns is the Member of Parliament on Vancouver Island, Courtney Alberni. And he has been doing some wonderful work as member of parliament prior to the time when I joined, working to get a national cycling plan for Canada. And he did some wonderful advocacy, something I was able to contribute a little bit to in my role as transport critic. And just in the last parliament, the federal government announced $400 million for active transportation infrastructure, including cycling infrastructure in Canada. So that's the first dedicated fund for active transportation in our country's history. And hopefully those funds are going to get dispersed to communities all across the country of different sizes, including places like Smithers. And that's going to make it safer and more convenient for folks to get around on two wheels. So I'm excited to see that roll out. I don't think it's nearly enough money, but it's a start. And of course, safe infrastructure is one of the best ways we can get more people on bicycles and using active transportation. So some exciting stuff, and there's more work to do.
Thank you. Those are great words. I'm looking forward to seeing it happen.
I love this.
And there was a couple of times when I would bike to work in Ottawa where it gets super cold there, and my limit was if my eyelashes froze and I couldn't open them again without pouring water on them or rubbing them super hard, then I'd probably, maybe it's time to not get on the bike. But it's kind of like, anything to do with being outside at all, right? Like it's hard to say there's bad weather. There's just, bad clothing, bad prep. Like I biked in today and it was just way better than walking or driving. I live in town, so that's pretty easy. But there was more than a few times in Ottawa where, just because I was able to find some studded tires for the front of the bike. Okay, now my range is way better. And if you can find the route, right? Like if you can find a way where you're sort of if it weren't for cars, it wouldn't be a problem at all. But bikes and cars in winter, that's when a lot of people get nervous. And so finding enough space or a route that doesn't have you interacting with many cars is ideal, because it takes the stress way down. Because people are pretty distracted these days, and the bike is, not as totally reliable. You got to have a little bit of room for it sliding or slipping or being a bit different. It's also fun. Like today's ride in was a lot of fun. It's just nice to be around town, and I can just get anywhere, park anywhere I want, and makes it all easier.
Yeah, as somebody said on social media this week, they felt like they were getting away with something when they rode their bike into town. And there's
Right.
an element to that, isn't there?
Well, it's kind of like once you've bought the bike and a lock and a helmet, like it's free. It's something that you jump on and go do, and feel better when you get there. And I got a job once because I biked to the interview, and because it was a job for an outdoor, a really high-end sort of complicated outdoor training place, working with disadvantaged kids. And one of the questions the interviewer asked is, which way is the wind blowing today? And we were in a basement hotel meeting room doing these interviews, and I had a headwind all the way in. And so I knew it was coming from the southwest. Like that, man, was a tough ride. So I said, well, it's the southwest. And apparently most people didn't get the answer right, because they had driven to the interview. You jump out of the car, you don't really notice which way the wind's coming from. And I thought, well, that biking got me that job. I wouldn't have been able to get it above these other equally or more qualified people, because I knew which way the wind was blowing.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So there was a lot of early morning events when I was working in Parliament, and I had my routine. I had a bike, and I had good enough tires to get it just about anywhere. And I got up, and it was cold, and there was a bunch of snow, but enough to get through. But I could tell the traffic, the whole city was having problems. And so I get to the event, and I had made it so I could wear a dress shirt underneath and look okay enough that people wouldn't look at me sideways. And I get there, and it's empty, and I think, well, I must be in the wrong place, because there's no one here except me and this other guy. And he was kind of starting to pack things up because no one was showing up. And I said, oh, what's going on? He says, well, how did you get here? Like, he was staying in the hotel right above where the event was taking place. And I said, well, I just got into work, commuted, biked into work. And he's like, oh, a cyclist. That's why. Everybody else was reliant on all these forms, which is understandable. But just that I've always appreciated it because it was kind of up to me, like my own effort, my own getting ready, and I didn't have to rely on a bus schedule, didn't have to rely on if the car was going to start, whether the roads were cleared a certain way. Like it was on me, and I really like that independence of being able to jump on the bike and go where I need to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fantastic story.
It's I mean, cyclists, we can be a bit virtuous too sometimes, right? But it's more to me, getting just about any time. It's unless you have to go super far, it's better than driving. In that I just feel better whenever I get there, and if it takes me an extra 20 minutes or whatever, fine. But I know, and it also, leaving work, the 10 or 15-minute ride helps clear the head too. It's just not the same way in a car. I don't find it the same experience of like, this is a transition. I'm outside, I'm paying attention to something else, and now I'm home, and it feels good every time.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Totally agreed.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Not a bit. Anytime.
Great story. I'm guessing that a lot of the Smithers Mountain Bike Association members do it for exercise. So what are the advantages to riding a bicycle in winter when it comes to your health and wellness?
Well, there's a lot of them, I guess. And it depends on the individual. Some people, this time of year, they're riding a bike, but it's a stationary bike inside. And that's fine, if that's what you have the time for. But for me, just to be in the outdoors, breathe the fresh air, maybe get a little sun, just taking your surroundings is huge. So for me, that's just a nice mental way of escaping indoors that a lot of times in the winter we're in too much, right? Mm-hmm. And I do a lot of my riding at night. So day or night, it doesn't matter. Bring lights and you can always go for a bike ride. As far as the fitness side, so one of the big reasons I got into fat tire bike, and just because it's fun, is typically, I'm in the mountains if there's snow, or playing in the mountains with split boarding, or snowmobiling, or even snowshoeing. But when the mountains kind of crap out, when it gets rainy and crusty and the snow's crappy, I have something else to do for exercise down in the town. So I've got an alternative. I'm not whining because the mountains aren't there. I can now go on my bike and ride outdoors and still get that exercise that I need, so that when I go back to the mountains, my legs are still in shape. My body's more or less in pretty good shape for it. The other thing with fat tire biking, with a lot of biking, is, especially as we age, is you're using your whole body as well. Like a lot of times on a stationary bike, you're just bottom half. So you're using your whole body. You're also working a lot more on your hand-eye coordination. And the trails typically are a little bit narrower than what we would ride in the summer. So all those things just help to keep your body going, your brain going. All that coordination lends itself to just keeping you more alert overall, physically and mentally as we age. And so that's another big reason. A lot of my friends ride bikes in the winter too. So it's something for us to do, like, again, when the mountains are crappy, and it's all part of that socializing. It's outdoors. I'm social distancing. I'm, in today's world, but we can go for a great ride. We can stop and chat. At the end of it, we can sit around and tailgate and have a beer or whatever, and talk about it. And it's just another way to get together with your friends instead of sitting in front of the TV and eating a bunch of Cheetos or something, right? So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
it sounds like so much fun, Brad.
Well, it's one more thing in the quiver of recreational activities, and it's not a super expensive sport. I get it. Not everybody, my bike was, I think, $2,500 with the tires, and it's an investment, but I think for my health and overall, and keeping me sane through those winter periods when it is cold, or the mountains are not in great shape, like cold up top and the mountains aren't in great shape, I still have something I can do down here. I can leave my house and be on my bike in 15 minutes, and I can rip for an hour and a half and come home. So tonight after dinner, I can go for a ride and get all my exercise in and feel good about it. So that's the plan.
How far can a person go on a bike in winter?
Oh, sky's the limit. How good a shape are you in? How much time do you have? Did you pack a lunch? Are you dressed warm enough? I've gone on 7-hour bike rides in the winter, and yeah.
Wow.
And had a blast. Like I used to have a route on a creek that snowmobilers would often snowmobile down the center of this creek. It's like a small river. And so I would take my fat bike and I would hop onto that river and get onto one of those packed on areas from snowmobiles, and I would ride down that river. And it was like being in the middle of the wilderness, even though I'm right in town, because the creek's got these steep sides with trees covered and all the houses are up above. So I would just ride down this creek all through town and get on. Then I'd hit the Bulkley River, and then I'd ride down the frozen Bulkley River until I was right out of town. And I would pack a lunch and bring my dog, and it would literally be the better part of the daylight part of a Saturday in the middle of winter. And it was just so much fun.
Was that in Houston?
Yep.
Houston has so many little gems.
Oh yeah, no, you got to look for stuff, but it's there.
That's awesome. And why do you love cycling in winter?
Oh, why do I love cycling in winter? Well, it's fun to be outside with the wind on your face, and riding a bike is always a joy. So, joy is the first word that comes to mind. It's faster than walking. As I said before, I'm often running late and I'm in a rush, and just the efficiency of getting around by bicycle. You don't have to start it up and wait 10 minutes for it to warm up. You just grab it and go. And really it's the convenience and the ease of getting around that's the other big reason to ride a bike in the winter. So those are a couple things that motivate me to get on my bike.
That's really terrific. Thank you, Taylor. You've inspired me. I'm going to get the bike out right now.
Awesome. And I'm walking to the grocery store to get a butternut squash, but I did bring my bike out just so I can show you. This is the bike I ride in Ottawa in the winter, and it's just a regular old British city bike with fenders and an enclosed chain. So it's got a chain guard that keeps the whole works all covered, and there's nothing special about it. There's no studded tires. There's no fancy winter features. It's just a regular old bike, and it works great. When it's slushy out, it's a little less than awesome. Often on really slushy days, I'll walk just because the salty slush really gums up the bike, and then when I bring it back inside, it all drips off and makes a big mess. But everyone approaches winter biking differently. Some people have all sorts of fancy specialized gear and studded tires and fat bikes and hand warmers and all that stuff. My approach is a little more streamlined. I just do it the same as I do in the summer. And if it's cold, I wear more clothes. And that's about all there is to it.
Wow. Thank you for that, Taylor. That's great. Anybody can do this.
Yeah, for sure. It's just about the joy of getting on two wheels and getting around, and, do it in the winter, do it in the summer, do it all the time.
Totally. Thanks.
Cool.
Why we love cycling in winter? Yeah. Well, freedom of moving under your own power. It's just, it's a feel of freedom. It's a feeling of independence. It's also obviously better for the environment. It's cost effective too. Like if you work a 5-minute drive from home, by the time you get your vehicle warmed up and the 10 minutes to warm up your vehicle, you're running your vehicle only for 5 minutes. Unless you got to be dressed in super dressy clothes, riding your bike in the winter is a good idea if you don't have much to carry. It's good exercise. You're probably going to be a little more awake by the time you get to work. Same thing on the way home. You can think about the things you need to do with, or on the way to work, you can think about the things you need to do at work, and you're just going to have a clearer mind.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Peter.
I think my tires are fatter than yours.
Thank you so much to our caliper hosts, Christine Bruce, and speakers Taylor, Nathan, Mika, Brad, Trevor, and Peter. We hope you enjoy this mashup of cycling-inspired interviews with Northern locals and cycling experts. Again, our goal is that you would learn a little bit about winter cycling, how to prepare, and a little how to take care of your bikes. Most importantly, we hope you'll register for GoByBike Week, February 7th to 13th, and spin your wheels for at least one ride. Every ride counts. Send your questions from today's webinar to smithersbikes@gmail.com, and I will follow up with you. Thanks again to GoByBike BC Society, the provincial coordinator, Terry Lynn Gifford, and our provincial sponsors, Province of British Columbia, BC Hydro, Big Bear Software, ICBC Exodus Travels. See you on the trails and happy cycling.
Any fun stories you want to share about cycling in winter?
Oh, I don't have a super fun cycling in winter story, but I do have a fun story that I used to bike a lot when I was in Japan. My kids and I, we went and lived in Japan for 3 months. They went to school there for a few months. And when we were there, everybody in Japan rides bikes. And the reason for that, I mean, it's necessity, it's space. There aren't many places to be able to park your car, and there's just a lot of cars. It's very expensive to drive a vehicle there. So everyone rides electric bikes. And all the moms or the parents ride these bikes called mama charin. So mama, which is mom, charin means bell. So they're called mama charin bikes. So you put a child on the front of the bike and you put a child on the back of the bike, and they're all electric. And they are everywhere. And every parent, everybody like has one of these bikes. And when you go to the school to drop your kid off, when you drop your child off, there are just, mama charin bikes lined up everywhere. And I bought one of those as soon as we got there. And I couldn't believe how much we could get done in just having this bike. And it just seemed like, as a culture and a society, I mean, everybody was used to having these bikes around. I wouldn't say it was always the safest way to bike, but in Japan, you can ride on the sidewalks and such. But it just seemed like it was more accepted, and people were used to it, but they've been doing that for so many years. I remember going to Japan and I remember seeing these electric mama charin bikes when I was little. So it's really interesting now, we're seeing more of that over here with these rad bikes that are coming out and new electric bikes that are coming out. And I love that we're seeing more of that here. So yeah, I would say that's not a specific winter biking story, but that was a really wonderful experience for me to be able to have access to a bike like that, to be able to source a bike like that with my kids when I was in Japan, and just the amount of area that we were able to cover. And it's so different. The experience is so different when you're on a bike relative to walking, even. Riding the train, riding the bus, or in a vehicle. I felt like we just saw so much more. We just had that much more flexibility. So I'm really happy to see now that it's kind of coming to North America, and it's just becoming more accessible.
I love that we're normalizing something that sounds like so much fun.
Yeah, it is. And it was so much fun. Exactly.